You're listening to the Telltale channel. Don't forget to check me out on all social media: Patreon, Twitter, Teespring, and Etsy. All links can be found in the description or on my website, telltaleatheist.com. So the next article I want to take a look at is called "Mark Taylor Says Protesters Are Mind Control Victims Doing the Bidding of People with Umbrellas." This is by Right Wing Watch, so let's give it a read and see what it has to say. Mark Taylor, a QAnon conspiracy theorist and so-called firefighter prophet, quote-unquote, about whom Liberty University made a movie in 2018, appeared on the Red Pill 78 YouTube channel Sunday, where he claimed that protesters who have taken to the streets across the country in recent months are victims of mind control whose actions are being orchestrated by handlers carrying umbrellas. All right, let's give this video a watch and see what he had to say here.
All these kids you're seeing in the streets, the MK Ultra, it only takes like an hour. They have it down to an art. They have it down to a science. They will fragment your mind into 100 pieces. And each piece is separated with a dissociative wall of amnesia.
Okay, that's not how mind control works. I'm sure most people know that, but there are a lot of misconceptions and completely ridiculous ideas about how mind control works. Most of the perception around mind control and how it works comes from like movies and conspiracy theories. That's not how it works at all. I've been talking about mind control on my channel for years. Like, I think I'm on 5 years now I've been talking about this stuff. That is just not how it works. That's like what you see in movies. What is he saying here? Let me back this up a little bit and see what he said about it again.
And each piece is separated with a dissociative wall of amnesia.
What does that mean? You're breaking up their like consciousness, and there's a dissociative wall between each piece? That's just like completely nonsensical. That is not how it works. I think I've talked about this before, but Robert Lifton wrote a book about Chinese mind control. The Chinese studied mind control a long time ago on prisoners of war, like American prisoners of war. They studied how to basically brainwash somebody. So you'd send a red-blooded American in to fight a war, a patriot to the core, bleeds red, white, and blue. And they'd be captured by the Chinese, and 2 months later, video would come out of these people talking about how the U.S. is wrong and the Chinese government is right, and we need to adopt communism and all of this stuff. How does that happen? And in such a short amount of time? How does that kind of mind control happen? Mind control is very difficult to do in normal circumstances. If I'm trying to deprogram somebody or something like that, compliance techniques, it's hard to do unless you don't care about their civil rights. If you don't care about their human rights, there's like a manual you can follow. The Chinese wrote it. You do little things to push them over on these issues little by little. So, for example, you had these prisoners of war in China, some American prisoners of war. What they would do is they would sit these people down, these Americans, they'd sit them down and they would say, "How do you feel about the Chinese government?" And they would just let them get it out. They would say, "Give me a positive to the United States. Tell me one good thing about the U.S." And they would give you one good thing, these red, white, and blue patriots. And then the Chinese would say, "Now give me one positive thing about the Chinese government." And these people didn't really want to do it because they were fighting a war against them. So the Chinese would say, "I'll tell you what, if you list one good thing about the Chinese government, I will give you 3 loose cigarettes for it." And they're like, "Well, what? Just one thing? Just have to list one thing, that's it? And you'll give me like loose cigarettes?" "Sure." So they would say one good thing about the Chinese government. And they'd say, "Okay, now tell me one bad thing about the United States and one bad thing about the Chinese government." and I'll give you 3 more loose cigarettes. Or they'd have them write essays about it, about one good thing about the U.S., one good thing about China, one bad thing about the U.S., one bad thing about China. And they'd give them loose cigarettes for it. And afterward, they would post these essays, the bad things about the U.S., the good things about China. They would put them on like telephone poles around the POW camp so that their fellow prisoners would see what they said about it. You're not asking them to go way out of the way and say this outrageous stuff. It was just one good thing and one bad thing. That's it. What's the big deal? And they didn't give them that much to do it. They didn't give them so much that the person could say, they gave me freedom. They let me go if I said this stuff. They didn't want that. They wanted them to own it. So they'd give them something really small so they would be embarrassed to say what they gave them. Because you wouldn't want to say you sold out your government for 3 loose cigarettes. So they'd post these essays around and give them the cigarettes, and they'd bring the next guy in. Next thing you know, you're seeing this stuff posted all over the place. All of the prisoners of war, or most of them at least, have had one good thing to say about the Chinese government and one bad thing to say about the U.S. government. And they would do that kind of thing in that pattern over months and months and months, and they push them a little bit further. Now just say 2 good things about communism. Now just say 2 good things about the leader, things like that. There's this study. I'm sure you guys probably seen it. They talked about it on Mythbusters years ago. But they put this, they'd take these people, right? And they'd have them clean up dog shit. So they had 10 people clean up dog shit, and then they had 10 other people clean up dog shit, but they'd have them put a pencil in their mouth while they did it, which makes their mouth go like this. So their brain feels like they're smiling, even though they're not. It's because of the pencil. The people who had the pencil in their mouth rated the experience of cleaning up dog shit as more enjoyable or less dreadful, I guess. Because what you're doing on the outside is reflected on the inside. So over enough time with these prisoners of war in China, if you get them to say one good thing about the Chinese government, one bad thing about the U.S. government, and you hear all of your fellow prisoners of war saying the same things, you see what they said posted across the telephone poles and the billboards in the camp, outward things are reflected inward. So they started feeling more positively about the Chinese government because they were giving them stuff. They seemed to be treating them well. They were nice to them. So after 6 months, a year of these compliance techniques, basically, the Chinese government had a bunch of U.S. red, white, and blue patriots coming out against the U.S. government and talking about the bad things about the U.S. government and the great things about communism. That is how real mind control and brainwashing works. That's how they did it. And Robert J. Lifton wrote a book on this whole process. Really fascinating read if you guys wanted to read it. I don't remember the name of it now, but Robert J. Lifton's the author. You should take a look at it. What this guy is saying about shattering the mind into 100 pieces and having them all separated into dissociative parts, that's nonsense. That's not how it works. I've studied brainwashing. I've studied mind control at great length. I've read many books on the subject. This is complete fucking nonsense. Let's continue.
So they can program each piece. The programming's in you. She said, when you see Hillary or the Queen wearing purple, that's end of the world programming.
End of the world programming. What does that mean? He's just making up words, buzzwords, and throwing them together. That's what he's doing. It's completely nonsensical. What does Hillary Clinton have to do with like purple and end of the world and all this shit? What does this have to do with anything? Nobody fucking liked Hillary Clinton. Was there anybody out there that was enthusiastic about voting for Hillary Clinton? Like literally any human being on this planet? Nobody liked Hillary Clinton, and to this day, they don't really. I don't know how he's connecting these dots, but it's completely nonsensical.
If they're wearing green, it means this. If they put out something in verbatim, like on Twitter, it activates the codes. Some may be assassination codes. Some may be other codes. She says she says they're doing it in daycare. They're doing it elementary, junior high, high school. Churches are doing it. If you put your kids in daycare, listen, it is mind-numbing. She confirms so many things that the Lord was showing me that was going on. Now, all these guys in the streets, this is why they can't be reasoned with. You see Rand Paul trying to reason with these guys? Oh. Or it wasn't reason with them. It was, but you can't even talk to these guys. Mm-hmm. That's what Rand Paul was trying to say. You can't even reason with these guys. You can't reason with someone that's been mind controlled.
You can reason with people. The trick to talking to somebody who has been mind controlled, which, by the way, I just want to state for the record, as though I need to, this is completely fabricated. Protesters are not mind controlled. At the very least, not like this. This is complete bullshit. Like this is complete fiction, beginning to end. This is not how mind control works at all. But if you were dealing with somebody who was mind controlled, like, for example, the prisoners of war from China that I talked about a minute ago, you can reason with them. You can reason with Mormons and Scientologists and Jehovah's Witnesses and other cult members and people who have been full-blown brainwashed. It's possible to reason with them, but you have to go about it in a very specific way. First of all, if you don't need to worry about their human rights, like if it's like the U.S. government and they don't really give a shit, you can basically do the same thing to deprogram them, pretty much. Exact same thing that the Chinese government did to program them. If you are worried about their human rights, which we are on this channel, then you can use another style of compliance technique called street epistemology. That's what I use to try to deprogram people, is street epistemology. There are other types of compliance techniques that respect human rights, but succeed in influencing people. For example, neuro-linguistic programming. It's the standard scumbag car salesman technique, basically, where you wear certain colors because people are more likely to buy when they see the color green or whatever. Or get in the trunk of their car if you're a car salesman. You see that they have camping equipment, then casually bring up that you love camping, like completely unconnected to anything. They feel this personal connection with you because, hey, they love camping too. Try to form a trust relationship with them. That's really the key to all of it. And in NLP, manipulate that. That's why I don't use NLP. It's an immoral system. And NLP only works in short bursts. Because if you use it for an extended period of time, people start catching on to the fact that you're acting like a scumbag. It's basically impossible to do NLP without coming across like a scumbag. You look like a scumbag when you use neuro-linguistic programming. That's why everybody hates car salesmen, because they are trained to use that. Anyway, got a little bit off track there. Let's continue listening here.
Do you notice the guys in the streets with the umbrellas?
Yes.
Those are their handlers, brother.
Yeah, I've often thought that, yeah.
That activates the programming. As she said, what that does, the umbrella reminds them and activates the violence programming, saying that if you don't get violent, we will activate the tormenting spirits that we have placed in you to torment you until you do.
Activate the tormenting spirits? What is he talking about? None of this adds up. Like, none of it. Activate the tormenting spirit. I'm sorry, just bumped my mic. Activate the tormenting spirits if you don't do what we say. And they're using umbrellas to send codes or some shit like that. This is fucking bizarre. What is this guy talking about? That guy, as I mentioned, is a QAnon conspiracy theorist and obviously a Trump supporter. He was wearing a giant ass fucking Trump 2020 hat. And as I said before, he was the subject of a 2018 film put out by Liberty University. And in it, he was called the Firefighter Prophet. I read a little bit about the guy. This is on the Daily Beast. It's all about the 2018 film. The title was God Gave Us the Donald, Firefighter Prophet Says in film. Retired firefighter Mark Taylor was snoozing. Oh my God. Retired firefighter Mark Taylor was snoozing in front of a Donald Trump appearance on Fox News one afternoon in 2011 when he started to hear a voice coming from the TV. A voice, you say? From a TV? What are the chances? But the sound wasn't coming from the real estate mogul, Taylor would claim later. It was coming from God. That's pretty much all you need to know about the film. The guy claims that God spoke to him and told him that he needs to get everybody to vote for Donald Trump because Donald Trump is special. He's a prophet sent by Jesus, blah, 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 all that other shit. So let's read the article about the clip we just watched and see what it says on Right Wing Watch. Relying on the claims of an outlandish conspiracy theorist named Gina Phillips, who has appeared several times on Chris McDonald's program, where Taylor is a regular guest, to spread outrageous tales of satanic ritual abuse and the like, Taylor uncorked a bizarre explanation for the nation's current civil unrest. Quote, all these kids we're seeing in the streets, the MK Ultra, it only takes like an hour, Taylor said. They have it down to an art. They have it down to a science. They will fragment your mind into 100 pieces, and each piece is separated with a disassociated wall of amnesia so they can program each piece. The programming is in you. When you see Hillary Clinton or the Queen wearing purple, that's the end of the world programming, he continued. If they're wearing green, it means this. If they put out something verbatim on Twitter, it activates the code. So maybe assassination codes, maybe other codes. All these teachers are doing it in daycare. They're doing it in elementary, junior high, high school. Churches are doing it. Like I said, this is completely fabricated. The government did experiment with this stuff called MK Ultra. They ended the program because it wasn't accomplishing the exact goals that they wanted, because that's not how the human mind works. They discovered that the hard way after wasting a ton of money. The Chinese had it down when they were doing the experiments, and that's how you brainwash somebody, how I described earlier, how Robert J. Lifton described in his book. It's not like this. This is like movie stuff. This is what you see in the movies, not in reality.